Have lots of folks joining. We have about 155 folks that are registered. So we're rapidly gaining on 60 folks right now. So we still have a few more folks to join in. But while people are joining, first of all, I just wanted to welcome all of you. It's so much fun to see faces from all over the globe here with us this morning. Very exciting. And I want to just go over a couple of housekeeping details before the meeting gets started. I think at this point, you're all probably Zoom experts, but I want to remind you about a few things that we're going to do this morning to facilitate voting and trying to make things as easy as possible. Number one, the most important way to communicate will be through the chat. So if you want to make a motion or second a motion or make a comment, ask a question, the best place to do that is through the chat mechanism at the bottom of your screen in the menu bar. And we'll be monitoring that chat throughout the meeting. So if you have questions, we'll make sure to make the chair aware of those. So that's number one. Number two, we are going to attempt to use an online polling feature of Zoom to take votes on general things. So you will see an abbreviated version of the motion on your screen, and you will have an opportunity, if you are a corporation member, a voting member of the corporation, to vote either in favor or to oppose a particular motion. And again, we will be monitoring that. We'll share the results with everyone. And fingers crossed that that goes smoothly. If that doesn't, then we're going to revert to the chat, and you can just put yay or nay in the chat, and we will track your votes that way. I don't think there's anything particularly controversial or challenging on our agenda this morning, so hopefully that will go very smoothly. But just wanted to get a couple of those things. We're going to keep everyone muted to the extent that we can. Just to try and minimize interruption and background noise and feedback. So,
I thought it was just me, Jerry.
What's that?
I thought it was just me.
Oh, yeah, I know. Don't take it personally. And we also, I think, recognize that many of you had hoped to be in Salisbury Cove in person for this meeting, as is the tradition of the lab, and it's certainly a highlight of our summer to be able to welcome all of you to Salisbury Cove. But we did put together just a little video clip that we hope might actually remind you a bit of all the things that are special about MDIBL. So I'm going to attempt to share that with you now, just as a brief bit of entertainment as we're waiting for everyone to join. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I see that we are nearly ready. I think we have 95 folks joining us this morning, and I'm sure others will join as they have a chance. So let me just share my screen and we can get started.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Welcome, everybody. We still have an echo, so it might help if everyone put their phone on mute. If we're the only ones, then we'll figure out something out here. Peggy, are you on mute? Okay. Is it hearable despite the echo?
It is. We can hear you, Ed.
The echo's kind of audible too.
Yeah. If anyone has the phone and the computer audio on, that does it too. Okay, so we have a full agenda, and during the next 20 minutes, I'd like to get through our call the business meeting to order, run the business meeting, and then get into the meat of the meeting, which will be reports from Herman and his colleagues about the progress of the lab. So first, could I have a moment of appreciation for Lou Kinter. Lou, as many of you know, has a long time association with the lab, distinguished member of the biotechnical business space, and has been a supporter of the lab and served on the board where he played a very important role in the evolution of our real estate committee. And anyone who walks on the lab today and remembers walking on it just a few years ago recognizes what an amazing transformation we've seen in this campus and in the capabilities of the campus to support our work. So a special thanks to Lou and our best wishes to him for the next phase in his career and his life. The second now is I'd like to formally call the business meeting to order, and if I had my gavel, I would pound it, so I'll just pounding a chair. So I need approval of the minutes, and Jerry will poll this. So I need a motion. Somebody needs to come. Did somebody move?
So moved.
Great. And a second.
Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions or concerns? Hearing none. Jerry, you want to open the poll?
Just when you think things are going to roll very smoothly, I've lost the polling option on my screen. I suspect, Emily, if you were the host, you may have that down at the bottom of your screen. There we go. Can everyone see that on their screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we know our number here, Jerry?
Currently, we are 100.
Well, the polls in Salisbury Clove project that the minutes are going to win by a healthy margin. They're currently leading 57% to 0.
Let's hope November goes as well.
And there are no Russian characters in the votes here, so. Okay, the motion passes. We'll keep the poll open long enough to be sure we've recorded all the votes, but we have a clear majority.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you. Second, if I call on Alan Kornberg, thank you, Alan, for joining us for the Secretary's report.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Okay. There are currently 236 members of the corporation, 16 full members, 32 associate members, 2 honorary members, 151 life full members, 35 life associate members. 5 members of the corporation passed away in the last year. Helmut Weber and Dr. Gary Conrad, who were life full members. Dr. Josephine Solano, who was a full member and trustee. Leah Berliner, who was an associate member. And Dr. Gerhard Geibisch, who was an honorary member. So that is the secretary's report.
Thank you very much, Alan. And I would just like to take a moment to recognize some of the members that we've lost this year. This seems to have been a year where we're particularly hard hit by the loss of members who were especially active with our board or with our scientific programs or with our support system throughout a number of years, going all the way back to the pre-transition years to our current configuration as a regenerative medicine biology lab. So Helmut Weber, known to many, many people who are in attendance today, is a former trustee, longtime supporter of the lab, a very active participant in our both our social and educational activities and in the deliberations of the board. So I would like to acknowledge him, and at the end we'll stand for a moment of silence for all 5. Particularly missing Joe Solano. Joe joined our board just a few years ago. She led all of medical education and career development activities at Pfizer, a major executive job. She brought to the board the combination of executive expertise and competence and sophistication, but a real feel for the human elements of working in highly technical and scientific fields that also had to touch into the real world of business and finance and all of the things necessary for our sustainability. She was a phenomenal colleague and friend, and we're going to miss her a great deal. She worked on laboratory matters almost up to the very day of her death. I think it's an indication of her concern and dedication to the lab. We lost a special investigator this year, Gary Conrad. Gary, close personal friend of Peggy and me, as is Gail. We lost him suddenly just a few weeks ago. And Gary is known, I think, throughout the community as one of the longest time stalwarts of the investigator group that goes back to the days that built this lab as a world-class facility for studying the regulation of salt, water, movement of ions and acid and fluids across cell membranes, so-called osmoregulation, a fundamental part of the physiology that keeps us whole. Interesting to me that I saw just yesterday that several drug companies are now revisiting that field in search for new and previously unthought of drug opportunities. Gary was also an extraordinary teacher. He was revered by his students. If we had a prize for the most enthusiastic summer cafe teacher, it would be Gary. And very, very loyal to the principles and to the legacy of the lab. So he clearly will be greatly missed. Lee Berliner was the mother of one of our present investigators, Nancy Berliner, and the spouse of one of our former scientific directors, Dr. Bob Berliner, who was a renowned renal physiologist. Um, they were up here every summer, or most summers at least, for probably 6 to 7 decades. Very attached to the lab, very supportive of the lab, in a very nice way, stayed involved, offered their thoughts, but never tried to micromanage from their prior positions. So we extend our best thoughts to the Berliner family. And finally, Gerhard Diebisch would be best known to the active scientists here in the lab, particularly those in the fields of physiology, salt and water homeostasis, iron and solute transport. That's a mouthful of very complicated fields. Gerhard was master of all of them. He was a mentor to many of the people who came through here in science. He's a major reason why Yale Physiology, Yale Medicine has always been one of our most closely connected institutions to the lab. So these people contributed enormously to who we are. They help us remember how we got here in our first phase. It's a first area of emphasis on those fields of interest, how we built this community of scientists, and how much we're going to miss them. So with a special vote of thanks to them, could I ask for a moment of silence? Thank you. Move on now to the treasurer's report. I'm sorry, to my nominating report. And I have several nominations to present. I am here as acting chair of the board for Peter Allen, but my official role is vice chair of the board and chair of the nominating committee, which comes attached. So I have several recommendations. The first is a slate of nominees for re-election to the, I gotta get this right, Jerry, is this to the Board of Trustees?
That's correct, Ed.
Yeah, to the Board of Trustees of the class of 2024. The nominees are Janice L. Coates, PhD, Ruth Sayre, Ann H. Lehman, and Dennis L. Schubert. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, or concerns? Okay, the polling is up. I'll wait a moment. Looks like we already have a majority, Jerry.
Yes.
So the motion passes, and welcome back to the board. These members have already been great assets to our board. The second part of my report is to get your vote on the following slate of nominees, which we respectfully submit for the 2021 nominating committee. Those nominees are, by the way, this needs to have the balance of members of the corporation who are not trustees and trustees, and it does have the proper balance. A majority of non-trustees. So the first nominee is Edward Benz, Chair, Barbara Belts, PhD, Geraldine Bowers, Alan B. Miller, Esquire, I. Wistar Morris III, Patricio Silva, MD, and Daphne W. Trotter, Esquire, all members who have served this distinction before. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, could we poll? Okay, we've clearly passed a majority. We'll continue to collect it for the record. I wonder if it's, Jerry, is it legal that the motion was approved before it was voted on?
Sorry. I have a happy trigger finger.
Okay, the motions, all motions for nominations pass, and we'll move on to the treasurer's report. Tom, are you set for the treasurer's report?
I am.
Thank you.
So thank you, Ed. Let's go to the next slide, please. Today, I'll report on the financial position of the laboratory as of the end of 2019. In addition, I'm providing a brief update on events of early 2020 that have affected some aspects of our financial position. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted businesses worldwide, including nonprofit research institutions, and we would be remiss not to mention it today. Here's a brief summary of where we stand, and I'm sure others will have additional comments as we move through the day. Research activities on campus have been partially interrupted, but due to our rural location, not as significantly as universities and large research institutions in metropolitan areas. Any interruptions have the potential to impact the rate at which we will pull in grant money during 2020. The summer programs are being redesigned to enable virtual attendance and other creative forms of engagement. However, total revenues from the summer program tuition and from fees for housing and dining are expected to be reduced in 2020. In early 2020, there was market volatility, and this has impacted our investments like the endowment. However, we are benefiting from a more conservative investment strategy that was adopted by the Finance Committee in 2019, and we've been able to weather the storm. Currently, the value of the endowment is down only single-digit percents from where it was at the end of 2019. Further, we applied for and received a PPP loan from the Small Business Administration. This was through the assistance of Bar Harbor Bank and Trust. This award will support non-federally funded salaries during the pandemic. The loan monies that are spent by the end of the loan period are eligible for forgiveness under federal guidelines. And of great significance to us, finally, we were fortunate to receive major philanthropic gifts in early 2020. These have bolstered our reserve fund and have enabled us to avoid more serious cutbacks. So in summary, we continue to be intact as a laboratory and we continue on in good shape. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Tom, a little bit of technical difficulty here.
Okay.
For some reason, I don't have a,
There we go. So thanks, Jerry. This slide summarizes the financial position of the laboratory as of the end of 2019 in comparison with the prior year. As you can see, the cash position of the laboratory remains strong. As in prior years, funds were set aside for strategic growth, and these have been maintained. Cash overall decreased at 2019 year end by $400,000 compared with the previous year. And that was associated with corresponding increases or decreases in the next two areas, which are shown on the chart. Grants receivable decreased by over $1 million from its high value at year end 2018. This is shown in the second line. And assets held in investment type accounts increased by $1.3 million. This is shown in the third line. The institution continues to pay down the $5 million bond that helped finance the Morris Laboratory building in 2007. This is shown in the line called bonds payable. We make regular principal and interest payments, and $4 million in debt remains to be paid off by the year 2036. The red boxes show total net assets. Total net assets amounted to $23.3 million at year end 2019, a small decrease from the prior year. Next slide, please. If you can get the pie chart for net assets, please.
Oh dear.
Back. There we go. The $23.3 million of net assets are distributed among 46 different categories or funds. The largest category is plant assets. This is shown in green, and this comprises land and buildings. The more liquid general unrestricted dollars and the reserve funds are shown in blue and red, respectively. The general unrestricted funds, the reserve funds, and the plant assets do not have restrictions on them. Other funds may be restricted by the donor for specific purposes, and the institution may use all or a portion of the investment income that these funds earn. In accordance with the laboratory's strategic plan, the research faculty and education programs have grown judiciously over the past several years. As in previous years, and is expected to continue into the future, there is a gap between the cost of recruiting and maintaining new faculty and the grant revenue that comes in for funding their research. So there's a gap between the cost of maintaining the faculty and the funding that we get. The board uses a portion of the reserve funds each year to fill that gap. In 2019, $1 million was pulled from reserve funds to bridge this gap. And at the end of the year, the reserve fund had a balance of $4.4 million. In addition to the funds shown here, the Maine Community Foundation manages the Salisbury Cove Research Fund, established by Tom Marin and the Marin Foundation. Funds are made available each year. They made a very generous grant in 2019 to fund visiting scientists, and we remain very grateful for that support. Next slide, please. Statement of activities, please. There we go. This slide shows the statement of activities for the year 2019. Activities include operating support and revenues, as well as operating expenses. I note that again, through the work of our finance department, our financial statements have been extensively reformatted to report the presence or absence of donor restrictions in accordance with the most recent nonprofit accounting guidelines. Operating support and revenue in 2019 were $9.7 million. Operating expenses were $11.6 million, resulting in a negative change in net assets resulting from operations of $1.9 million. Depreciation, which is a non-cash expense, made up $1.1 million of this shortfall. The budget gap, as I mentioned previously, between revenue and expenses was addressed by transferring funds from the research reserve fund. Moving down the slide, as shown in the lowest red box, the non-operating change in net assets was a positive change of $1.4 million in 2019. This was due mainly to positive returns in the investment portfolio. In summary, in 2019, total net assets from combined operations and non-operating activities decreased by $500,000, resulting in the balance of $23.3 million at the end of 2019. Next slide, please. This slide breaks out the categories of our operating expenses. Total operating expenses were $11.6 million in 2019. If we exclude $1.1 million in depreciation, operating expenses amounted to $10.5 million for the year. Of these expenses, 73%, or about $7.7 million, was for research and educational programs. This includes dollars that were distributed to other institutions through the state of Maine through the INBRI program. In addition, 22% of expenses were for management in general. These are the costs needed to operate the organization, such as administration, accounting, budgeting, legal, insurance, grant reporting, and compliance. That's the purple sector. And 5% was for fundraising activities for the purpose of obtaining contributions to support the institution and its missions. This is the green sector. Next slide, please. This chart illustrates how the institution covered the $10.5 million in operating expenses in 2019. 63% came in the form of federal grants and contracts. These are the blue and red sectors. 44% of that funding covered costs at MDI Biological Laboratory. This is in blue. And 19% of that, which amounts to over $2 million, is distributed to colleges and universities within the state through the INBRI program. This is shown in the red sector. 2 federal grants from the National Institutes of Health continue to provide major support to the institution. The INBRI grant brings in $1.5 million plus $2 million for the subawards each year. We are in the second year of a 5-year award cycle. And secondly, the COBRI grant amounts to $2.2 million this year, and it supports our faculty each year. We recently began year 3 of a 5-year award cycle for the COBRI grant. Next slide, please. This concludes the Treasurer's report for the annual meeting. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Questions or comments for Tom?
On the first slide, there was a big decrease in, I think, the second line. I can't remember. Can you just repeat?
David, could you speak up a little?
Sorry. On the first, your very first slide, Tom, on the second line, there was, I think, a big decrease, and I didn't quite catch what that was.
Yeah, so we go back, that would be the financial position, and the second line was grant monies receivable. And we did mention that there was a decrease in that number compared to the 2018 amount. Part of that was due to a very favorable year in 2018 that we're comparing it to.
And Tom, if I can interject as well and help answer David's question. The grant receivables at year end 2018 was unusually high due to timing. So it does not typically run that high. And so the grant receivable as of 12/31/2019 is more in line.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Tom, this is Jim. The withdrawal from reserve funds this year, how does that compare to the last several years? I know we've been spending that down over time, and of course this is an unusual year, but how does that compare to previous years?
We've been withdrawing significant amounts from reserve funds each year. We've needed to do this to maintain our status with the loan for the lab. At the end of 2019, it it's starting to look quite noticeable that we're draining the reserve funds each year, and we only have a finite number of years to keep going at that rate. In 2020, there's a number of adjustments. It's not just a pandemic, but we've been very fortunate to be the beneficiaries of some philanthropic gifts, and these gifts have gone to replenish the reserve fund. So actually at the current time, we're in a very good position with our reserve fund, and we're not looking at any criticality with it at all. We'll see what happens between now and the end of the year, but right now on paper, we're not looking to require any drawdown from reserve funds at this time.
Thank you.
Just one other quick thing, Claudine. Number one, thanks for all your efforts. But number two, it might be interesting when you have time to take some of those values and plot them over some time period, like 5 years or something like that. So you get a visual of how things are changing.
Of the reserve fund?
Well, a lot of these, like the grant income and other things, it just gives a suggestion of whether we're moving upward or downward or whatever.
Okay, it's easier to take in. Thank you.
Yeah, just a year-by-year report on our financial reserves. Other questions or comments? If not, our final part of our business meeting is the audit committee report. I'm very happy to have Alan Miller come up here to give that report to us.
Where's the best place, right here? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, do we need a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
Oh, sorry, sorry, Tom, my fault. 100%. You may be the only unanimous winner of an election in 2020.
So moved.
Passed, motion passed.
Shall I proceed, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The MDI Biological Laboratory Audit Committee, consisting of myself, Tom Boyd, Worcester Morris, Dean Reed, and Daphne Trotter, met with Annette Gould, the auditor from HMV LLC, on Monday of this week, July 20, at 2 p.m. Ms. Gould discussed the audit, what was covered, and some of the examinations performed in the auditor's opinion dated May 11, 2020. The financial statements fairly present, in all material respects, the financial position of Mount Desert Island Biological Laboratory as of December 31, 2019, and the changes to its net assets and cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. Ms. Gould reported that this year's audit went very smoothly and that no changes had to be made in numbers presented by the laboratory, because these are the laboratory's numbers, and rendered a written opinion to support her verbal description. And that consists of my entire report today, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Is that your report, Alan?
That is my report, sir.
Thank you very much. We need a motion to approve.
So move.
Second,
Second.
thank you. All comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, could we have our poll, Jerry?
Should be there. Are you seeing it?
And we're already at a majority in favor. Is that right?
That's correct.
So we'll record the final number, which have all been unanimous so far, and declare this report approved.
Ed, this is Daphne Trotter. I think we may have to step back and just approve the secretary's report as well.
We did that. I failed to report it until our audit report started.
Yeah, it
Gary,
did.
just for the record, isn't that correct? We did it.
That is correct, Ed.
Thank you.
We did it. We didn't announce. It's my fault. We did not announce it properly, but it did go up. And it looked like we got 100%. But thanks, Daphne, for making sure we document that.
Thank you.
So one last item for the business meeting and one last motion that I think will receive unanimous approval. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
I'm gonna do it all in favor this time. All in favor?
aye.
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 Anyone objecting? David, I look at you, at a gleam in your eye. Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your attention.